Hello.
Welcome back to the Space School of Governors, BPSW, your favorite hangout place, and today we're going to take a look at what would have happened had the most undisciplined Jedi Master trained the Jedi's Chosen One. What would have happened had Quinlan Vos trained Anakin Skywalker? Before we begin the story, special thanks to Cameron Hall for writing it. I very much so appreciate it. And also, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everybody else a part of the Pente Patrol team. If you want a chance to win in our next giveaway, watch at the end of the video and I'll tell you how. Our story begins today, as all the way back in 50 BBY, on the inner rim planet of Kifu. Here, a young Kiflar male is born into Clan Vos. He was given the name of Quinlan. Shortly after birth, this young Vos would be given the mark of his clan, a yellow striped tattoo across his face. This powerful boy was soon to be found by the Jedi Order, who would request to take him back to Coruscant for training. The Kiflar, understanding Quinlan's psychometric abilities in the Force, rejected this idea, instead of opting to have the boy trained by the Jedi on the planet of Kifu. The Jedi Order agreed, allowing the Jedi Watchman of the planet, Master Tholm, to train the child. In the years coming, Quinlan Vos would be trained by Tholm in the ways of the Force. He would eventually hone in and perfect his abilities of retrocognition, the ability to sense and see information, memories, and events by touching objects related to them. This ability would lead to him being a very highly powerful Jedi youngling, having a very strong presence within the Force itself. While he would eventually obtain a lightsaber of his own and train in Form 4, the boy would prefer using the Force than using a blade. During all this, Quinlan would not be separated from his family or his clan, but rather would be able to communicate and form bonds with all of them. Several years of personal, extensive training on Kifu with Master Tholm would come and go before Quinlan would be sent down a dark road. His parents, Quian and Pethros Vos, were killed by Anzanti, a member of a violent cannibalistic Force-sensitive species. While Quinlan was not present during this time, his aunt eventually prodded him to handle his mother's locket. The moment the boy did this, he saw a blinding white light, then the death of his mother, her essence life being gone, his mind being sucked out by an Anzat. Quinlan fell to a deeply depressed state after this, only after being pulled out by Master Tholm's calming techniques within the Force itself. It was at this point that Master Tholm saw it as too dangerous to keep Quinlan on Kifu, opting to bring the boy to Coruscant to finish his training. As a Padawan inside of the Jedi Temple, Quinlan Vos would spend a majority of his time sparring and fighting, and starting fights that is, both in the training halls and literally anywhere else inside of the Jedi Temple. He also frequented the Jedi Library in his free time, although he would take up habits of Master Sunube, using the library to sleep more than anything else. Quinlan would become notorious among the Jedi Order for his rebellious activity and lack thereof care for the code and the rules of the Jedi themselves. Many nights he would not sleep, staying in his room, pacing back and forth, thinking back to memories of his mother's death. It haunted him, truly, and it led him to often attempt to reject his powers of retrocognition. While his personality often annoyed and frustrated many of the Jedi within the temple, the young Vos grew close to several of the children of his class, including the young Padawan of Qui-Gon Jinn, that being Obi-Wan Kenobi. Despite all of this, Vos would continue to progress in his mastery of the Force, eventually conquering his fears of his own psychometric powers. This would lead him to become an expert in a tracker. In his early teens, Vos, as well as Master Tholm, would frequent missions to the criminal underworld of the galaxy, seeking out crime lords, spice rings, slave traders, and everything in between all that. It would also be on one of these missions, to the underworld of Coruscant, that Quinlan would enter a mysterious tavern in the G17 district of the city. Here, Vos would immediately be offered the drug known as Rill, a variation of spice coming from Ryloth. Vos was quick to decline this offer, instead of requesting to become a dealer of the drug. Without his master's approval, or even that of the council, Quinlan would go undercover, spending several months dealing spice in the Coruscant underworld, gaining the trust of spice traders and learning their ways. Eventually, the still Padawan would dismantle the entire spice ring from the inside out, collaborating with the Coruscant police to see the capture of the crime lords of Coruscant. It was an accomplishment that Vos would not only be knighted, but also assigned the position of Jedi Liaison to the local authorities. This would keep the now Jedi Knight on Coruscant for the majority of this time, whether it be going undercover to infiltrate crime rings, or tracking the highest level of most wanted individuals within the city, or even just collecting data on an array of topics. However, this was not always the case, as Vos was growing into a spirited and motivated man, often trailing from his own missions to pursue even the most obscure leads. One of these very leads would lead him off-world, and it would be to none other than the planet that he would find the supplier of the real ring he destroyed several years prior. On this mission, Quinlan Vos would find himself in a run-down low-life part of the planet. It would be here that he would come across a young Twi'lek slave girl in the mansion of the Hutts. This girl, Aayla Secura, displayed a sensitivity to the Force, one strong enough for Quinlan to recognize. After the success of this planet and the mission that he took to take down the real supplier working for the Hutts, Vos would take Aayla Secura back to Coruscant, offering himself to be the master of the young girl. Over the coming years, Vos would train Secura in the ways of the Force, teaching her Form 4 of lightsaber combat while he himself delved into Form 7. He would also take Secura on missions all over Coruscant and the galaxy too, showing her the ins and outs of the crime world and his work within it. On one such mission, an extensive undercover operation as it was, classified and unknown to all outside of the Jedi Council, Vos and Secura would find themselves on Tatooine. While in Mos Espa, enjoying a drink in an outdoor cantina, Quinlan Vos would be shocked to see Master Qui-Gon Jinn walking down the street, accompanied by a young woman and followed by a blue and white astromech. As they passed by, Vos put his head down, hoping that Qui-Gon didn't notice him and potentially blow his cover. His sigh of relief as the party passed by. Yet moments later, a Gungan walked past, taking particular interest in the food vendor in front of the establishment. The Gungan used his tongue to grab one of the creatures hanging at the vendor's door without paying. When caught, the clumsy, out-of-toner releases the delicacy, sending it soaring into the full glass of Soboba's. Vos knew Soboba well. They weren't friends by any means, but they did occasionally were forced to work together during Quinlan's time undercover, and he knew that Soboba would pummel this clumsy Gungan, whatever the Gungan was doing out here on Tatooine. Sure enough, Soboba jumped up and kicked the Gungan in the chest, sending him flying back. As Soboba goes to see and continue the attacker outside, a young boy steps up and stops him, preventing any further action from Soboba. Quinlan chuckled to himself. He found this entire situation very amusing, and it was also a nice break from the seriousness of being undercover. This, though, vanished as Qui-Gon, with the young woman and droid, reappeared from around the corner to help the Gungan up. As he did so, Qui-Gon looked behind him, spotting the friend of his Padawan. Vos's eyes widened as he made eye contact with Jinn for a brief moment, but the Jedi Master looked away. Qui-Gon, knowing how Quinlan's missions usually were, figured that he was undercover and did not want to give that away, that they knew each other instead. Jinn directed the group away, eventually deciding to stay with Anakin and Shmi for the night to avoid an incoming sandstorm. Over the coming days, Quinlan would stray away from his mission at hand. Instead, he and Aayla would follow Qui-Gon and Anakin, observing their every move. From the interaction with Watto to the Boonta Eve Classic, Vos and Secura would stand in the shadows, watching the group. Quinlan could sense the force emanating from the young boy, and is relieved to watch him win the pod race, as well as the freedom from slavery. Though Qui-Gon, Anakin, and the rest of the group would depart off-world almost immediately after the Boonta Eve Classic. Quinlan would find himself wanting to help the boy, give Anakin what he lost so long ago. Several weeks after the departure from the Jedi, Quinlan would collect all the credits he had accumulated from his time undercover, as well as some of what the Order gave him to fund his mission. Walking into Watto's shop, Quinlan offered a Toydarian a vast amount of credits for the freedom of Shmi Skywalker. While hesitant, Watto would eventually accept the offer, and Shmi would be freed from her shackles, unbeknownst to who freed her or why they did so. After, Vos would find out via the holonet that Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn had died on Naboo at the hands of Darth Maul, the first Sith seen in generations. Maul was quickly dispatched by Obi-Wan Kenobi after the duel. Quinlan, though not too close with the Jedi Master, was distraught to hear this news. He expressed to his Padawan that they could have helped Jinn, getting him to Coruscant or at least offering him credits and connections any way to get back to Coruscant. Aayla would understand, but she would also console Vos, telling him that they couldn't blow their cover and that there was nothing they could do. They had to be focused on their mission, and Qui-Gon knew that just as well as anybody else. Vos smiled at the idea of seeing Obi-Wan again, as Ayla mentioned that they should go back to Coruscant. And Vos also hoped for the idea of meeting the young Skywalker as well. After finishing their covert mission on Tatooine, Quinlan and Ayla would return to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Within a few months, Ayla would pass her Jedi trials and become a knight within the Order. At this point, the Council, though distasteful of Vos, would offer the still young Kiflar a seat in their ranks. While many of the Jedi Masters disapproved of this decision, Master Yoda felt that Quinlan would offer an alternative perspective to the rest of them, challenging them in their decision-making processes. However, Vos quite enjoyed his work undercover. He liked the thrill of pursuing crime lords and trafficking rings. He would respectfully decline the offer, telling Yoda that it was not his time just yet. Over the course of the next year and a half, Quinlan Vos would remain on Coruscant, dealing with crime in the underworld and going into several short-term undercover missions. This would be interrupted, though, when he received a transmission from the Jedi Council. Irritated, thinking it would be another offer to join them, Vos would make his way back up into the upper levels of the city and back into the Jedi Temple itself. As he arrived at the base of the temple steps, Quinlan was met by Master Yoda. Confused, Quinlan approached the old master.
Welcome, young Kifar. Success you have been having,
Quinlan would smile. No matter his mood, the way the old man talked always brought him joy. Quinlan replied,
I was, until I had to pause a week-long pursuit in level 1997. Why is it you called me here?
Yoda began walking forward and up the many cascading steps of the Jedi Temple, and Vos followed.
Graduated. A new class of younglings has. A new Padawan we have for you.
Quinlan was taken aback. It had been less than 2 years since Ayla had become a knight, and he was quite enjoying the life on his own at the time being. He knew he would eventually take on another Padawan, but he hoped to at least wait a couple more years, as he told Master Yoda.
Master Yoda, I'm not sure that I'm ready for another Padawan. Not yet. Not now.
Master Yoda just laughed, as Yoda explained that this youngling was one that Vos was very familiar with, and one that shared a similar experience to himself. As the two entered the temple and walked the corridors towards the High Council Chamber Tower, Yoda would explain that young Anakin Skywalker, from Tatooine, had already graduated from becoming a youngling, and was ready to be assigned a master. While Obi-Wan wanted the role, mostly due to his promise to Qui-Gon, the Council felt that Quinlan would be better fit. Not only had he already trained a Padawan into knighthood, but he shared a common characteristic with Anakin. They both had attachments to their past. Both knew their families, or for families, Anakin knew his mother. And both had a very emotional tie to their past, their home, their friends, their memories of a different life. Quinlan, recognizing the name Skywalker, remembered back to him freeing Shmi Skywalker and watching Qui-Gon take Anakin off-world and back to Coruscant sometime before his death. In the High Council chambers, Quinlan and Yoda would walk in to see a room full of recent youngling graduates, as well as a High Council member in their respective seats. Behind the Council members was a handful of Jedi Knights. All of these older Jedi were about to select themselves a Padawan, to lead and train in the ways of the Force. While it was often tradition for Council members with the most seniority to have their choice of Padawan, if they so choose to, this selection was a bit different. As Yoda took a seat, he waved Vos forward and pointed out Anakin Skywalker, who looked nearly the same he did as he was on Tatooine only a few years earlier.
Come, young Skywalker. Your new mentor, Master Vos, shall be.
Yoda waved over Anakin, who walked slowly to the Grand Master, staring at Obi-Wan the entire time. A red anger grew on Obi-Wan's face as he stared at Master Yoda. He was supposed to train Anakin. He promised Qui-Gon in his dying wish. How could the Council not follow that through? That's all he could think about. As the selection process began, Masters picked out their new Padawans. Master Luminar Unduli chose a young girl of her own species, named Bera Zophie. Ayla Secura, who was also present, was the only one there at the request of the Council. She had not intended on taking a Padawan of her own. However, seeing her master taking on a second, she felt that she may have the best time now to take on an apprentice of her own. When it came time for her to choose, she would select an older Padawan of the class. One who barely passed her graduation trials, a green-skinned Twi'lek named Finn Urte. Quinlan would smile at this, proud of his former student for having the courage to take on the role of teaching. As the selection went on, through the anger of Obi-Wan grew, and every Jedi in the room could feel it, even the graduates themselves. When it came his turn to choose his Padawan, he stared at the council members, angry, confused, and hurt. He told every single one of them that it was his duty to train Anakin, and that the council shouldn't be placing the boy with Quinlan. Vos opened his mouth to speak, but Obi-Wan wasn't finished. Respectfully, the boy, the chosen one, was entrusted to me. Qui-Gon died knowing that I would train him. You can't just take that away, can you? Master Windu would speak up, telling the young Kenobi that they decided it would be best for Quinlan to train the boy. This boy was indeed the chosen one, and he should be entrusted to a trained master. One with more experience, and, of course, one with a similar background to that of Anakin. Quinlan was a perfect fit, and the choice wasn't to be taken personally. Windu told Obi-Wan that they had to do what was best for Anakin, no matter how much it hurt him. Obi-Wan, in disbelief, walked out of the room. He couldn't believe this. He felt like the order Qui-Gon had given his life to had just betrayed him. He had no idea what to do, what to think, or what to feel. Quinlan, after this, would bring Anakin back to the base level of the Jedi Temple, sensing the conflict within him. He would ask Anakin if everything were alright, but the boy would stay silent. Quinlan knelt down to his level and put his hand on Anakin's shoulder, looking him directly in the eyes. He asked his new Padawan if he recognized him. Anakin shook his head, saying no. Quinlan smiled before recalling a day he had on Tatooine. There was one where he saw Anakin for the first time. The boy perked up at this. He had no idea that Quinlan was ever there that day, or ever, for a matter of fact. Quinlan goes to tell Anakin that he had not always followed the Jedi Code, and that the reason he was never around the temple is because he didn't all that much enjoy the strictness of the Order or the Council. He stood up, asking Anakin to follow him, as he walked towards the door of the temple. Unlike most Padawans, who wouldn't leave the Jedi Temple until several months into their training with their master, Anakin would find himself traversing the upper level of Coruscant on the first day of his apprenticeship. Granted, the Anakin lived most of his life far away from the temple, but this was unusual. The young boy looked around in awe. He had seen the city before, but not like this, not up close. As the two walked, Quinlan asked Anakin if he could keep a secret. Anakin, who had let loose a little bit, wore a smile and nodded his head. Quinlan told him that just weeks after Qui-Gon took him back to Coruscant, he had freed Shmi, giving her the ability to live her life as she pleased. Anakin's smile grew as his mouth dropped open. He felt guilt each and every day for years about leaving her on Tatooine in a life of slavery, and now all that guilt was gone. All the guilt and pain he had over the past few years vanished as he ran up to his master and hugged him. Anakin knew that this wasn't acceptable behavior, but he could tell that Quinlan wasn't really an accepted person among the Order. Quinlan smiled and hugged the boy back before pulling him along. Quinlan would bring Anakin to his personal residence, only a few levels beneath the Coruscant upper levels. Anakin would ask Vos why he had his own home, as all the Jedi had places to live inside of the temple. Quinlan laughed as he said,
"Most people in the temple aren't fond of me. Let's just say I was a bit rebellious during my time as a Padawan. If I'm being honest, I think that the only reason I was allowed to become a knight was because they wanted me to go off on my own."
The two laughed as Quinlan showed Anakin around his place, describing and joking about different missions he had been on throughout the years, and some of the odd or goofy roles he had to play while undercover. Back inside of the temple, Obi-Wan had isolated himself in his room. He thought that the isolation would calm him down, but he only became more and more angry and hurt. He knew he couldn't let this anger control him. He knew he's better than this, and he needed to find a way to balance himself. So, he called the only person who could help him. Obi-Wan picked up his comms link and made a call. Within moments, Satine Kryze showed up on the link's holoprojector. She was so happy to see him, happy to see that he was doing okay after years of not seeing him. Kenobi would smile. He forgot how beautiful Satine was. He told her that their things had not been great, and began telling her of all that had happened. He told her of the death of Qui-Gon and that he had been promoted to knighthood, which Satine was very congratulating on. He then told her of the situation regarding Anakin, and how he felt that the Council didn't trust him to train the boy. He told her that they had gone against the dying wish of Qui-Gon, and that made him question everything. Satine would smile, telling Obi-Wan that things would work themselves out over time. She asked if he felt that Quinlan would be a better teacher for Anakin, and Obi-Wan nodded. He knew that Quinlan was someone who watched his own mother die, and whose adherence to the code was not as strict as his own because of his previous life experiences. He knew that Quinlan was the best master for Anakin, but the choice of the Council still hurt him deeply. Obi-Wan would remain in his room for several more days after the conversation with Satine, meditating on the Force and finding peace with himself. Each night, he and Satine would talk, and they would grow closer together, as they had during their time on his extended mission on Mandalore several years before. He knew the risk of doing this, that he would fall back in love with the Duchess, but he needed her. He needed the support she gave, and the perspective with which he saw the world. When the two talked, Obi-Wan would tell her of the adventures that he and Qui-Gon took before his death, and she would talk to him about the life she led with Mandalore finally at peace. They would converse about the political atmosphere of the galaxy, often agreeing on many issues, but occasionally finding places in which they would be able to civilly debate on topics. She would tell him, as much as she appreciated the Jedi Order, it was moving away from a direction that tied too heavily to the politics of the Senate, and Obi-Wan would disagree, telling her that they were only keeping the balance. They would talk and debate for hours on end, most calls lasting through the early morning hours, and they both loved it. It gave Obi-Wan something to care about again, and it gave him the confidence he needed to be the best Jedi Knight he could be, for the time being. Back in the Undercity of Coruscant, Anakin would stay with Quinlan at his personal residence, just as Ayla had only several years prior. The two trained here in many ways with lightsaber combat and with the Force itself, with Anakin finally taking after his master in Form 4. Quinlan would also explain his powers of retrocognition within the Force to Anakin, who would be amazed with this idea. He would ask if he could learn it, to which Quinlan laughed and shook his head, telling his student that it was an ability that one was born with, not earned. Over the coming year, Quinlan would expose Anakin to more of the work he did, introducing him to the Coruscant police, and taking Anakin to some of the lower levels of the Undercity. He never took the boy lower than level 3000, knowing the risks of being the levels below it. Anakin adored this exploration. All he knew for the most of his life was this dry desert wasteland of Tatooine. There was no harsh wind, no scorching heat of two suns, and most importantly, no sand. There was only a mixing pot of cultures, species, and backgrounds that he found so interesting. The best of these, in Anakin's opinion, was level 3204, the Alderaanian level, where Anakin would frequent. He adored the cantinas and the restaurants that served authentic Alderaanian foods, and he would find people here to be very kind and welcoming. At one point, Anakin even told Quinlan that he no longer had the desire to go to every planet in every star system, like he had told Qui-Gon years before. Instead, he wanted to visit every level of Coruscant and experience the culture and people that lived there. Quinlan would smile at this, admiring the adventurous spirit of the boy. He didn't say anything yet, but Vos knew that there were some places on Coruscant that not even the most skilled Jedi would dare to go, and those places weren't even the worst of it. Within this time frame, Quinlan would also introduce Anakin to Aayla Secura and her new Padawan, Finn Urte. This would be Finn's first adventure outside of the Jedi Temple in her entire life, and Anakin could sense a Finn to fear in her. The four would convene in Quinlan's apartment, meditating and training together for hours. Aayla, of course, appreciated this, as she knew that she needed help from her former master in training the young Twi'lek. While Anakin had matured both in the Force and in combat for such a short time, Finn was struggling to her master, even with the basics of her new training. After the initial visit, the two Twi'leks would come around every few weeks, learning from Quinlan and finding company in him and Anakin. Finn would grow and find improvement in herself exponentially, and Aayla would also find herself learning from Quinlan, becoming more confident. This time in the realm of teaching would be emboldening for both Twi'leks. The four would continue to bond, as they would often take missions in the Undercity as a group, allowing Finn to experience the crime world of Coruscant for the first time, and Anakin to see the side of the city that wasn't so friendly or welcoming. During one more gruesome mission, Quinlan would lead the four to a cantina on the more scummy Crim-ridden level of 1997. Here, they were forced to engage in a duel with a group of bounty hunters who had taken a bounty out on Jedi Master Tera Sinube for foiling their plans to a local spice-dealing ring. While Anakin had seen many duels and fights on Tatooine, this battle was the first actual combat that Finn had ever seen, much less been in. She stood her ground well, but Anakin could sense the fear within her. After mere moments of combat, Aayla was struck in her shoulder by a blaster bolt from one of the bounty hunters. This would set off a spark in Quinlan, and Anakin would, for the first time, see the darker side of his master. Quinlan would rip through all 6 bounty hunters with ease before going back to check on Aayla. She was hurt, but she would recover quickly, if they could get her some back-to-patches soon, of course. Vos, knowing the underworld all too well, was quick to remember the location of the medical facility on this level. He, along with the other 2 Padawans, would rush Ayla there. Within hours, she would be healing well, and the 4 would be back into the upper levels of Coruscant. Quinlan would tell Ayla and Finn to take his and Anakin's rooms for the night, telling them that they would return to the temple in the morning once Ayla was finished recovering, and the 2 agreed. The next day, Ayla was lying in bed. Anakin could still sense the fear within Finn. This mission had scared her, and she was terrified of the Undercity. Anakin, knowing how to fix this, asked Qui-Gon if the 2 of them could go down to level 3204, so he could show Finn the bright areas of the city. Quinlan agreed, but ordered that the 2 be back by the early afternoon so that she and Ayla could head back to the Jedi Temple. Anakin nodded as he ran over to Finn and took her by the arm, leading her out of the apartment and into the city. She asked him where they were going, and he told her that it was a surprise, but he was sure that she would love it. He told her that it was his favorite place in the entire galaxy, and that she had to see it. The 2 would enter a lift that would bring them down thousands of levels, until they finally reached the Alderaanian sector of the city. As the lift doors opened, Anakin would run out, followed by a bit of a tense, hesitant Finn. The mission the day before had scared her, and she wasn't too keen on being here, this far into the Undercity. Anakin prodded her, though, and she followed him into a small restaurant nearby. Here, Anakin ordered the both of them, asking for 2 bowls of Alderaanian stew, an order of Ora bark, and 2 mugs of mocha. The waiter walked away. Finn asked Anakin what exactly he ordered, to which he responded for her not to worry and that she would like it. When the food came, the 2 began to eat. Finn's face lit up. She had only eaten food that the Order gave her back in the temple, and most of it was rather bland. She never had tasted something so unique and so delicious. She asked Anakin what else she had been missing out on, living inside the temple all this long, and Anakin could just do nothing but smile. Throughout the day, Anakin would take Finn all across this level, showing her different shops with Alderaanian trinkets and charms, restaurants and cantinas, where they tried different drinks and snacks, non-alcoholic drinks obviously, and even garages where they could see Alderaanian star skiffs and other ships on display. She was amazed, wanting to soak in every second of being here. Anakin was right, this was the greatest place in the entire galaxy, and she herself never wanted to leave. Early that evening, as Finn and the still recovering Ayla arrived back to the Jedi Temple, they would encounter Obi-Wan, pacing back and forth at the base of the Jedi High Council Tower. Ayla asked him if he was alright, to which he told her that he was fine, just nervous. Ayla nodded, while Finn wanted to prod more in hopes of helping him. Her master led her away. They needed to let Kenobi face his trials on his own. As the Twi'lek duo continued away throughout the temple, Kenobi mustered the courage to enter the lift and make his way to the council chamber. Though this ride to the top of the tower only took moments, it felt like hours to Obi-Wan. As the doors opened, his heart was beating out of his chest. He walked into the chambers with a dozen council eyes staring at him, with Shakti having taken her seat that Yoda had previously offered to Quinlan. Kenobi walked to the center of the room quietly and bowed his head to show the elders respect. Obi-Wan would be greeted by Mace, who asked him why exactly he had asked for this meeting before the High Council. Kenobi replied that he was hoping for one last chance of speaking to them regarding the training of young Anakin. Most of the High Council members sighed. Obi-Wan had met with them several times in the past year and a half to request Anakin to be reassigned to his Padawan, and each time they rejected the idea. His incessant insistence on training the boy was wearing most of the council down, yet Yoda allowed Kenobi once again to speak his case for training the Skywalker. Master, I understand your decision to have Quinlan train the boy. I have come to realize that he is the best teacher for Anakin. All I am asking is a chance to train with Anakin, side by side with Quinlan. This resolution, Kenobi thought, would allow him to fulfill his master's dying wish, without inhibiting Anakin's training or development. The council sat in silence, thinking on the matter. This may not actually be a bad idea, but a Padawan with 2 masters at the same time had never been done before. Yoda spoke up.
Discuss this, we must. Inform you of our decision. We will.
Kenobi would bow and leave the chambers. For the first time in so long, Obi-Wan was hopeful for the Order. Obi-Wan would depart the tower, retiring to his room for the night. The next day, he would exit the temple and make his way to the underbelly of Coruscant. Though him and Quinlan aren't as close as they used to be, Kenobi knows that he could talk to Quinlan, and maybe Vos could even ask the council to let him take a part in training the boy. He at least had to try. When he arrived at Quinlan's apartment, Anakin and Vos were nowhere to be found. Typical, Obi-Wan thought, as he knew as his old friend didn't like to stay in one place for all that long of a time. He would decide to wait in an alley of the building, hoping that the two would return to their residence soon. Meanwhile, Anakin and Quinlan were deep in the underbelly of Coruscant, sneaking through alleys and back rooms of shops in the pursuit of an arms dealer. While most people in the galaxy had a blaster of some sort, this was different. The Rodian crime lord known as Nechak was selling beta versions of new disruptor rifles, the highest bidders in the slums of the underworld. These rifles were designed to take out ships, but the Rodian was advertising use against organic beings, who would be gruesomely obliterated by this weapon. Quinlan had tracked the Rodian to a run-down bar on level 1671. Anakin had never been this far down before. He wasn't scared, he liked the adventure, and the confidence of his master only enforced this within him. Before long, the master and apprentice duo would see two Ewoks enter the establishment and sit at the bar. Just as they did, a Rodian stepped out from the back of the room and walked up to them. While he was in disguise, Vos recognized Nunchak almost immediately. The Rodian would offer the two Ewoks, that were actually Jawas, a drink so that they could be heard negotiating a deal with the arms dealer. At least, from what Anakin could make out, with his limited understanding of Jawese, within minutes, Nunchak would make sure that the two of these Jawas would be taken back to the back room of the bar. Quinlan and Anakin jumped up and stealthily followed the three. The two Jedi made their way to the alley where the Rodian and two Jawas were exchanging a crate of disruptors for several crates of credits. While Anakin was ready to jump into action, Quinlan held him back. Even they would be no match for the three with disruptors in their hands. Vos had seen them only used once, but it was one of the few memories he could never wipe away. The two sat up in thought for a moment. Then Anakin realized that he had a detonator charge on his hip. Smiling, he grabbed one and threw it at the crate, immediately setting it off. With a massive explosion, the detonators were destroyed, and Nunchak and the Jawas were dead. Quinlan looked at his Padawan, seeing that Anakin was just as impulsive as himself. He knew that he shouldn't be mad at the boy, or at least tell him that he needs to control his impulses, yet he was proud of his Padawan in a weird way. He admired Anakin for having the guts to do what most his age would find terrifying or even harsh. As long as it helped ensure success, though, it was good. The two of them would go back to the bar, ordering drinks and a bite to eat. For the first time, Quinlan saw Anakin as more than just a child. He saw him as a younger version of himself, and he respected the boy more than ever. After several more hours, the two would make their way back to Quinlan's residence, where they would find Obi-Wan meditating at their door. Kenobi would jump up, sensing the presence of the two, and bow to his former friend. Obi-Wan would be pulled in by a hug by Quinlan, which was unusual for Obi-Wan, and invite him in for a drink. Obi-Wan accepted, telling Vos that he had something he wanted to discuss. Instead, Obi-Wan told Quinlan that he wanted to help in the training of Anakin. He promised Qui-Gon years ago that he would do so, and he wanted to keep that promise. Quinlan knew of Obi-Wan's insistence to adhering to the Jedi Code, and the two, while friends, often disagreed in their ways. However, the guilt of not doing anything to help Qui-Gon all those years ago weighed heavily on Quinlan's heart, and he told Obi-Wan that if the Council agreed to it, then he would be okay with it, and he would allow Obi-Wan to help them train the boy. Obi-Wan smiled, thanking Vos for this. The two spent the remainder of the night talking and reminiscing about their days as Padawans, enjoying each other's company. Kenobi returned to the Jedi Temple the next morning in good spirits, with hopes of finally being able to fulfill his master's wishes. As weeks passed, then months, Obi-Wan would grow impatient. The Council would continue to delay his request, insisting that they needed more time to discuss the matter. Through this, Kenobi would spend his days in the library, studying the texts of the Order of the Past and inquiring with Jocasta Nu and Terrace Nube about bits of history that they might be able to tell him about. While this wasn't what he had hoped to be doing at this time, he wanted to stay within the temple so that, if the time came, he wouldn't miss his verdict to the Council. Each night, he would spend hours on the comlink talking to Satine again. He would confess his emotions to her, since he couldn't tell anyone within the Order about them. He would confide in her for answers. Eventually, he would realize that he was in love with her all over again. And, while he knew it was forbidden, he didn't want to deny it and lose her a second time. One night, well, more like one early morning, Obi-Wan let it slip to Satine that he had feelings for her, and he wished that they could be more than just friends. Satine smiled, telling him that she felt the exact same way. She told him that she wished so much that they could be together, but she understood the Jedi Code, and would never stand between Obi-Wan and the Order. As much as this should have pained Obi-Wan to know that she wouldn't pursue him, he only fell in love with her even more, knowing how much she respected and actually cared for him and what he felt and cared about. During this time, Quinlan would continue to train Anakin, taking him on missions and training him in the ways of the Force. As Anakin progressed, Quinlan would begin to challenge him. While this would start with teaching Anakin the introductory progressions of Form 7, it would continue as he would take Anakin deeper and deeper into the depths of the city. Anakin surpassed every challenge Vos put in front of him. That is, until Quinlan decided it was time to let his Padawan to level 5 of the city, the lowest inhabitable place on the planet. Even more so, the two wouldn't bring their lightsabers with them. While this was mainly to subject Anakin to as much controlled fear as possible, Quinlan also knew the growing rate of lightsabers on the black market, and that would put a target on their head almost immediately. Before this, Anakin had never been below level 1313. At first, he was excited to go on his journey, but as they arrived, a sense of fear enveloped the now teenager. Not only did it take hours to get down that far, but as they did, they were met with near complete darkness. Level 5 was a home of very few things outside of run-down tenement housing and occasional dimly lit bars. The two Jedi were met by stares from hooded figures, grotesque creatures, and rusted droids from a long time ago. Quinlan, while holding a demeanor of confidence, was just as terrified as Anakin. He had to give Anakin a sense of fear, though, so that the boy would know how to handle the terrors he would encounter in the future. Anakin's confidence had grown, almost too much so, and Quinlan wanted to make sure that the boy didn't develop a god complex. As the two made their way into one of the bars down here, they would be followed by a dozen or so figures. Quinlan would tell Anakin,
"Ignore them, Anakin. Keep your focus. Calm your mind."
The two entered the bar, and Quinlan took a seat. He told Anakin to order each of them an ale. Anakin looked at his master, confused, but Quinlan waved him on. Shakily, Anakin approached the scarred, foul-smelling Lasat bartender. The Lasat would grunt and look at the boy, who shakily dropped a few credits on the bar top. Stuttering, he asked for 2 ales, and the bartender chuckled. He took the credits and poured the boy 2 mugs of ale. Anakin, still shaking, brought the ale to Quinlan, spilling some on the floor. Quinlan, sensing the fear in Anakin, told him to drink the ale and rest. They were safe. As the two would leave the establishment, Quinlan suggested that they walk the dark, damp streets of the level. As they continued, they would be followed occasionally by 2 hooded and masked figures. Vos would spot a recognizable hat, one he knew to belong to the young Cad Bane. Vos and Bane had worked together on occasion in the underworld, taking down organizations they mutually wanted gone. For different reasons, obviously. Quinlan stopped, and without revealing his connection to Bane, he told his Padawan to approach the man. He handed Anakin a handful of credits and told him to buy the man some service as protection for their remainder of time in level 5. Anakin's face went white, as for the first time in his life he begged his master to leave the underworld and return home. Quinlan smiled and told the boy that this were essential, if they were to get out of here alive. Anakin's heart racing took the credits and slowly walked over to the blue-faced man, who said to him,
"Well, hello there, boy. I must say I have never seen someone so young in these parts. You must be lost."
Anakin, still shaking, held out the credits, asking if his master and he could buy the man's services to protect them down here. Cad Bane had to say,
"Ah, so I assume we have Jedi roaming down here."
As Bane looked over to Vos, who winked at his old colleague.
"It's been a long time, Vos. I had begun to wonder if I'd ever see you again."
"Bane, you know me. I'll always be around. You just gotta look."
The two laughed as Anakin gave a confused look to his master.
"Anakin Skywalker, I would like you to meet the one and only Cad Bane."
Anakin would reach out his hand, his mind filled with questions, as Bane gave him a handshake. The three would walk together, Quinlan and Bane reminiscing about old times, taking down spice rings and rival bounty hunters. Anakin's fear would weaken, as he noticed that nobody was following them anymore. Within the hour, the two Jedi would make their way out of the depths of level 5. Quinlan giving his thanks to Bane and reminding the bounty hunter that he could drop by any time. Over the course of the next few days, Anakin would grow, both physically in skill, and by the age of 16, Anakin would be almost as tall as 6'3". And he would grow into his body, with muscles gaining size. He would also begin to grow a bit of facial hair, sporting out constant waves of a 5 o'clock shadow, as it were. With this, the two would begin training with Master Windu on a weekly basis in the advanced specs of Form 7 lightsaber combat, which was beneficial to Quinlan just as it was to Anakin. The three would form a tight bond, with Master Windu finally taking Anakin to a liking. He saw how much the boy had grown, and he no longer sensed the arrogance, the struggles that Anakin once held. Mace admired the boy for this, and even more admired Quinn for raising him to be so. Ayla and Finn would also visit the two quite often, training together, learning together, and taking missions together. While Anakin had not felt the intense fear he encountered on level 5 since that day, he realized that he was just a man, and that he needed to be aware of this mortality, as well as those around him. His confidence remained high, but he no longer felt in control or dominated by his own self. Instead, he relied on his skills and on the Force. While the Council would eventually tell Obi-Wan that the boy was to be trained solely by Quinlan, as they did not want two conflicting ways of life and viewpoints influencing Anakin's training, Kenobi would still visit Quinlan and Anakin often. While Obi-Wan never directly trained the teenage Skywalker, he connected with him, sharing life stories, past mistakes, and even his secret relationship with Satine. Anakin began to view Obi-Wan as a brother-like figure, one who he admired and looked up to, but didn't take after. Obi-Wan, though, this time, became more enveloped by the history and legacy of the Jedi Order. Eventually, he would convince Jakaf Sanu to allow him access to the restricted Jedi Holocron Vault, with the permission of the Jedi Council. Here, he would delve into the secrets of the past, learning about the ancient Jedi and the numerous wars of the old Sith and the Jedi. Eventually, Obi-Wan would come to see what Satine tried to tell him all those years ago, that the Order had fallen from its place of neutrality, peace, and aid in the galaxy. Instead, they had become a vessel of the Republic, serving the Senate and the Chancellor instead of the people. While Obi-Wan would bring this concern to Master Yoda, privately, the aging Grand Master would tell Kenobi that now was not the time to distance from the Republic. Yoda could tell that something was on the horizon, and the Jedi needed to be prepared for as much of what would ever come next. As much as it may seem that they were too tied to the Republic, they needed to protect the Republic and its people, should the time come. As several more years passed, Finn would graduate into knighthood, passing her trials with flying colors. She had matured and grown into a talented young Jedi, and a strong connection to the Force, all thanks to the support and assistance of Quinlan and Anakin. Ayla would be offered a seat on the High Council as well, which she would actually accept graciously. She would take on another Padawan, no longer in need of help from her former master. One by one, more and more of Anakin's former classmates would graduate into knighthood. Eventually, only himself and Barra Sophie were still Padawans. While many in the Order recognized that Anakin held skills and connection to the Force that would make the trials look like a cakewalk, Anakin was in no rush at all to become that step of a Jedi. He enjoyed being beside Quinlan, and he knew that knighthood would bring him away from the life he came to love. The next year, and 22 BBY, Anakin wouldn't be given a choice. He and Quinlan were assigned to protect Senator Amidala of Naboo after a failed assassination attempt left her ship in pieces and one of her handmaids instead. While Anakin enjoyed seeing Padme again after so many years, he was no longer drawn to her. Maybe it was the fact that Quinlan always held distrust for politicians and passed those sentiments off to his Padawan, or maybe it was because Anakin had honestly forgotten about her. It had been so long since their last interaction, and Anakin had gone through so much since then. Either way, Anakin was here to protect the young senator, and nothing more. While the two Jedi were solely assigned to protect Padme Amidala, Quinlan and Anakin were not so strict as to how they would go about doing so. One night, as Padme lay asleep, Anakin and Quinlan would sense the presence of danger surrounding her. Bursting into the senator's room, Anakin would ignite his lightsaber, cutting two poisonous worms in half as they crawled on the bed. Quinlan looked outside, and he saw the deployment droid, and he would jump out of the window, shattering it and grabbing onto the droid. Anakin, on the other hand, would rush out to the landing bay and jump into the first speeder he could find, taking off and chasing after them. After mere moments, he would catch up to Quinlan and the droid, who were heading towards a masked figure standing on the side of a building. This bounty hunter, Zam Wessel, used her rifle to shoot the droid out of the air, and she hopped into a speeder of her own and flew off. Luckily, with Anakin being a masterful pilot that he was, picked up Quinlan quickly.
What took you so long?
Anakin remarked that he had to find a speeder that he really liked.
So you went with Yellow? Really?
The two laughed as they dodged in and coming speeders, flipping and turning as they continued their pursuit through the city, following Zam through narrow corridors and fire-laden industrial sectors. Quinlan would stand up, when he was able to, using his blaster, which he usually carried on his waist, and took pot shots at Zam's engines. Eventually, he landed a shot, taking out her left engine, as Wessel's ship crashed into a massive pillar. Wessel was able, though, to escape into the crowd, disappearing. Anakin would land as well, moving to chase the bounty hunter, but Quinlan stopped him. Quinlan would smile as he walked up to Zam's ship and touched it. His vision was going white. This was followed by a vision, one of a Mandalorian figure telling Zam to meet with him in the Outlander Club after the job was done. Quinlan knew of this place. He had been there a few times, and he led Anakin in that direction. As the two arrived in the club, Vos easily spotted Zam, who had thought she lost the Jedi in the streets. She was sitting alone at a table in the corner, sipping a light blue drink. The two were first greeted by a shaggy, deviled man with an antenna who asked them if he wanted to buy some death sticks. Quinlan smiled, telling him that he didn't have the credits at the moment, but asking where he could find him later. The two quietly and stealthily approached Zam, who hadn't noticed that they were there until it was too late. She tried to run, but Quinlan blocked her exit, forcing her to sit back down. Quinlan and Anakin would interrogate Zam, who was too stubborn and refused to give up any answers. She knew they were Jedi, and she even mocked them, telling them that they would never hurt her. Quinlan just smiled, before using the Force to raise Zam's arm up. Vos took off her glove and meditated on it, seeing the Mandalorian one more time in this vision. As he asked her,
"Who is the Mandalorian?"
she wore a look of shock as she looked up and said the name of Jango. Anakin, who was always impressed with this master's retrocognition, laughed as the two of them stood up, taking Zam by the arms. They were going to take her to the council before finding this Jango Fett. As they exited the bar, though, Quinlan could sense danger once again. He looked up to see a metal dart hovering right above Zam's head. Anakin had sensed it first and stopped it from hitting the bounty hunter. Quinlan looked to see the same Mandalorian flying off via a jetpack. Anakin pulled the dart slowly back toward him, taking it in his hand. He gave it to his master, and the second he touched it, his vision went white. His mind flooded with visions of Jango on Kamino, of the cloning facilities, and of the fish people he could only assume were natives of the planet. Quinlan knew how to find this Mandalorian, and he couldn't wait to do so. First, they had to catch up with the council on everything that had just happened. The two Jedi, with Zam in custody, entered the Jedi Temple and made their way to the High Council Tower. When they got in front of the council, Anakin recalled the assassination attempt on Padme, and Quinlan informed them of a Mandalorian, and his visions of Kamino, and a massive cloning facility. The council, impressed with their work, congratulated the men, and approved of Quinlan's request to find this planet called Kamino, and track down this Mandalorian named Jango. As for Padme, she would need someone to accompany her back to Naboo, so she could stay safe. Finn would be given this task, accompanied by her former master, Aayla Secura, and Ayla's new Padawan. They would be given orders to depart immediately to ensure the well-being of the Senator. As Quinlan and Anakin moved to leave, Mace told them to stay. He informed the duo that the council would accept this as Anakin's trial, and that they were officially giving him the rank of Jedi Knight. Quinlan was ecstatic. This meant he had trained two Padawans into knighthood, one of which sat on the Jedi Council. Anakin, on the other hand, was conflicted. He did not want to leave his master's side, and he didn't know what the Order even looked like outside of the missions, and he didn't know what the Order even looked like without missions to the underworld and without chasing crime lords and bandits. But this would have to wait. The council congratulated the men for their achievements before sending them on their way to find Kamino. After leaving the council chambers, the two would make their way to the Jedi archives. En route, Anakin expressed his concerns to Quinlan. Quinlan would laugh and explain that Anakin could still take missions with him in the Undercity, and that things would not be too much different. There were enough crime lords and smuggling rings on Coruscant alone for the both of them. In the archives, Quinlan would find Jocasta Nu and inquire about this mysterious planet of Kamino, as Anakin would do the same with Obi-Wan. Both Jocasta and Kenobi would scour the records, comparing each of their findings and knowledge of the galactic map. Yet neither had any idea of where this star system named Kamino was, much less the fish-like species of cloners that Quinlan was talking about. Defeated, Anakin and Quinlan would leave the temple. There was, however, one last option. Back in the Undercity, Quinlan would use his personal comlink to contact his old acquaintance, Cad Bane. Within hours, Bane would be heard knocking on Quinlan's door.
What do you need this time, boss?
Quinlan would welcome the bounty hunter into his home, telling him that they needed information on a seemingly non-existent planet, that of Kamino. Vos, knowing the way that Bane worked, offered the man a handful of credits for the information, hoping that Bane may have some knowledge. of use.
Camino, eh? May I assume you are looking for one, Jango Fett?
Quinlan was taken aback. He told Bane that Jango had attempted to assassinate Senator Amidala, and that was why they needed to get to him, to find the root of the situation.
I see. Well, funny enough, I met with Jango just a few days ago, and he told me all about these Kaminoans, and about their cloning techniques. I think I can take you there. For a price.
Bane laughed. He and Jango were on good terms, but nobody paid better than the Jedi. So, this was just common knowledge. Vos nodded, and his head in agreement, to which Cad Bane told the Jedi that they would leave at dawn. That night, after prepping for the mission, Quinlan would take Anakin down to level 1316. Anakin had been here a few times, but he wasn't all too familiar with it. The two would make their way through the streets, eventually stopping at a small shop with blackened out windows. Quinlan would hold the door open and usher Anakin in. Inside were rows of beds and chairs, as well as a dozen or so employees with tattoo guns in their hands, inking up their customers. "Quinlan!" exclaimed the man from the back of the shop. The man looked strangely similar to Quinlan, but with blue and bold and tattoos on his cheeks, and instead of a yellow stripe on his eyes, he said, "It is nice to see you. It's been too long." The Kiflar clan of Kashi grabbed Quinlan in for a big hug, asking him who the boy was. Quinlan responded that this was his Padawan, that had just become a knight. "Another one?" asked the man, laughing. He recalls the time that Ayla became a Jedi Knight, and Quinlan brought her to get her congratulatory tattoo. She had chosen a small black tattoo, nothing noticeable or Gandhi. Quinlan explained that to Anakin that this was a tradition among the Kiflar people, to get a tattoo once one graduated from training to symbolize their rank among their clan. He told Anakin that it was time to move forward, and that it was his time to choose a tattoo for himself. It didn't have to be big or a lot, but it had to be something to represent the next phase of Anakin's life. Anakin would spend the next hour or so flipping through pages upon pages of designs that were in the parlor, picking out different pieces of tattoos that he really liked. Eventually, he would approach Akashi Kiflar and tell him he made up his mind, pointing to an image. The Kiflar would get to work, having Anakin sit on the table, take off his shirt, and lay on the table. Over the coming hours and well into the night, he would use his tattoo gun to draw a series of straight lines and bands on Anakin's shoulder, back, and chest. The whirlpool pattern of sharp edges and turns made a well-flowing design that made even Quinlan jealous. To most, this tattoo would seem meaningless and worthless. To Anakin, though, it represented the structure of Coruscant's underworld. He knew that he wouldn't be able to stay and do his missions here with Quinlan forever, and he found his new tattoo to be a reminder of his time as a Padawan. After the tattoo was finally completed, the sun was about to rise on Coruscant's surface, though nobody on the inner city even knew that. Many of them had never even seen the sun or the light of day. Quinlan and Anakin made their way to the upper levels once more to meet with Cad Bane. As the group took off, Anakin would fall asleep in the back of the ship, exhausted from hours of being stabbed with a big needle. As the time through hyperspace would continue, Cad and Vos would detail a plan. Bane would drop him and Anakin off at the landing bay on Camino. Bane would then wait in orbit for the two. He would be paid handsomely for the transport to and from the planet. Upon arrival in the orbit around Camino, Anakin woke up. He asked Quinlan why he was so sore and why his skin hurt so bad, and his former master laughed. He told Anakin that this was the aftermath of a tattoo, but the back-to-patches on him would take care of the pain within a few days or even hours, something like that. Bane would drop off the Jedi on the main landing platform of Topeka City, where they were greeted by a tall Kaminoan, Taun We. She would escort them inside, noticing the lightsabers on their hips. She told them that the Kaminoans had been expecting the Jedi for some time, and she assumed that they were here to check up on the clones that they had commissioned nearly 10 years prior. Quinlan, confused, told her that the Jedi had no knowledge of doing such a cloning effort, and that they were here to find Jango Fett. Taun We smiled, telling him that Jango was the genetic model for the clones that they were all based on, and that they were here to meet the Prime Minister, Lama Stu, immediately. Upon arriving in the Prime Minister's office, which was blank with whiteness and bright light flowing through it, Anakin and Quinlan were told of the clone army, ordered by Master Sifo Dyas. Quinlan, now realizing he must act undercover, pretending to recall the initiative by the long-dead Jedi Master. Anakin asked if they could see the clones that were created here, and the Kaminoans were delighted to show off their masterpiece of cloning engineering. As the two Jedi inspected the clones, Quinlan would express his interest in their cloning techniques. We explained to him that they used a genetic alteration to make them more docile than their base genetic donor. Anakin, seeing the opportunity, asked if this base donor was Jango here on Kamino, and if they were able to meet him. Seeing no harm in this, We brought the two to Jango's residence. When they arrived, We and the Jedi were met at the door by Boba Fett, Jango's unaltered clone son. He led them into a small apartment, telling his father that they had visitors. Jango, stepping out of his room, smiled and introduced himself to the men. Anakin, ready to arrest the bounty hunter, stepped forward, but Quinlan held him back. Anakin may have been granted the rank of knighthood, but he was still as impulsive as he had always been. Quinlan introduced himself to Jango, telling him that they were thoroughly impressed with the clones that Jango made. Jango assured them that the clone army would be quite effective in combat, and Quinlan couldn't help but agree. Anakin asked if Jango had recently been to the Corps, which Jango responded with a half-hearted maybe. Anakin would ask if he had known anyone named Zam Wesell. Jango would respond,
"Well, we bounty hunters tend to know each other pretty well, so yeah."
Quinlan would nod to Jango, thanking the bounty hunter for his time, and took Anakin by the arm, leading him out of the residence, but not before snagging a small device off of Jango's shelf. Jango, knowing that the Jedi were on his tail, told Boba to pack his things, that they were going to leave his place. Quinlan, on the other hand, would tell the Kaminoans that they had only given transport to the planet and that they would need a way off-world. He had enough credits to pay for his ship, but the Kaminoans told him that they would just simply charge it to the Republic. After obtaining a ship, a Kaminoan flight pod, the two Jedi would take off, noticing Slave 1 taking off from the other side of the city. In orbit, Quinlan would contact Bane, telling him that they got a ride, and to head back to Coruscant. He had already informed the Council that he had been enlisted in Bane's assistance in finding Kamino, and all the bounty hunter had to do was retrieve his payment from the temple. With Quinlan giving Anakin the pilot's chair, he would sit in the backseat of the ship, holding the device he stole from Jango's apartment. As he did, his vision went white, and then he saw a face he remembered all too well. Master Dooku. Dooku, referred to as Tyrannus by Jango, was located on Geonosis. Quinlan could see a conference room with different leaders sitting at it. He could hear something about a droid army. Vos would come out of the vision, telling Anakin to head towards Geonosis, but to take the long way there. The duo spent the next couple hours jumping in and out of hyperspace, traveling out of the way to ensure Jango didn't know he was being tracked. Upon arrival in Geonosis, they would land their ship far away from the majority of populated areas, choosing to instead walk through the desert. Eventually, they would come across a series of massive holes in the ground and caves on cliffsides, many of which led to factories and foundries of different sorts. The two would enter one of these caves and make their way through the area. Here, they discovered thousands of conveyor belts and machines, all creating weapons and battle droids, the same droids that Anakin saw a decade ago on Naboo. As Quinlan and Anakin continued down the long, narrow hallways, they began to hear voices. Specifically, Quinlan was able to pick out Dooku's voice among the rest. As the voices got closer and closer, the group could be heard talking about the droid army, a treaty, and the death of the senator from Naboo. Quinlan ordered Anakin to hurry back to the ship, telling him to contact the Council to tell them of this development. Quinlan, on the other hand, would try to sneak round, finding more information about this new situation he had uncovered with his former Padawan. Quinlan would follow the group led by Dooku into a chamber, the same one from his vision. Here, he saw the former Jedi Master discussing a treaty of secession with a leading group of members of different business corporations and alliances. Dooku was telling the group that he would have thousands of systems rallying to their cause, and that, with the massive army of battle droids, the Jedi and the Republic would succumb to any demands made of them. Quinlan, knowing that this couldn't be good, ran back to the ship, needing to inform the Council that there was a secessionist movement brewing here in the Outer Rim. When he arrived at the ship, though, he saw Anakin fighting off a group of Geonosins. How they had found him, he didn't know, but this was bad. Igniting his lightsaber, Vos took the bugs out by surprise as he slashed them apart with ease. Anakin, panting from his unexpected fight, told his former master that he hadn't been able to get through to the Jedi Council. He was, though, able to reach Finn on Naboo, who was informing the Jedi Council at the moment. Quinlan thanked Anakin before jumping into the ship and turning the transmitter on once more. He connected through to Ayla, who asked if he was okay. Quinlan, without realizing it, was covered in yellow Geonosian blood. He told his former Twi'lek apprentice that there was a situation here in Geonosis and that they needed reinforcements. He explained that Master Dooku had recruited the galactic corporations and alliances into some sort of secession treaty, in which they planned to use a droid army to beat the Republic into submission. Ayla told Vos that she would contact the Council immediately, and then bring herself and Finn to Geonosis as backup, leaving her Padawan on Naboo with Padme. Quinlan thanked her, and shut their transmissions off. He noticed, though, that there had been groups of Geonosians scurrying on the ground cliff faces. Quinlan thought that, since they were so far out, there wouldn't be any notice of them from here, but he was wrong. Within the hour, Vos and Anakin noticed that the amount of Geonosians around them was growing. They could sense it. Then, all at once, the bugs attacked the men, attempting to hold them down and bind their wrists. It was evident that they wanted the Jedi as prisoners, but Anakin and Quinlan had other plans. They would fight the bugs off with ease, at first ripping through the mindless Geonosians with a flurry of lightsaber attacks. However, after a while, the sheer amount of forces overpowered the two Jedi as they retreated past their ship and farther into the desert. While the two would have to fight and hide off from the bugs for hours, reinforcements eventually did arrive, with Ayla and Finn coming in to the rescue. Soon after, Mace, along with a few other 100 Jedi, would drop from the sky and help push back the Geonosian reinforcements. Before long, a full-on battle would erupt, with droids marching through the desert, followed by Dooku, Jango, and the rest of the Separatist Council. They wanted to see firsthand how their droids would stand up to the Republic for the first time. The droids plus Jango would take down a few dozen Jedi, despite the open desert, allowing for swift escapes. The droids had numbers, and they used this to advantage. The battle, it seemed, was about to be lost. Suddenly, gunships began shooting through the sky, flying down to the Jedi's aid, and blasting away the droids. Yoda had gone to Kamino and retrieved the first 200,000 clones that were being created, bringing them to as a second wave of backup to the Jedi forces on Geonosis. The battle continued on, neither side truly gaining any advantage, but the Jedi no longer losing. At one point, Quinlan and Jango would find themselves face to face. While Jango's speciality was killing Jedi, Vos was no ordinary Jedi. As the two blasted and struck at each other, they would engage in one of the most nerve-wracking fights of all time. Quinlan knew the Mandalorian Beskar armor would prove to make his lightsaber obsolete, so he focused on strikes towards only the weak points of Jango's armor, his arms. With a lunge, then a jump, Quinlan was able to slice off the left arm of the bounty hunter. As the man went down, Vos saw the opportunity to end the man in one swift movement. Quinlan kicked the helmet off of Jango and took his head off clean off. As the battle continued, it was evident that things would end in a stalemate. The Jedi forces chose to retreat, leaving the planet and taking their newly acquired clone forces back to Coruscant. On the capital planet, the Republic and the Jedi Council would agree that the Jedi Masters and Knights were to be made generals in this new Grand Army of the Republic. While many Jedi agreed to this, claiming it to be a pursuit of peace, Obi-Wan had a different view. What Satine had told him years earlier was true. The Jedi were just a vessel of the Republic, and they no longer stood for unbiased peace and aid in the galaxy. Shortly after the Jedi became militarized, Kenobi would approach the Council with his disapproval. While many of them agreed with this premise he offered, they stood firm in belief that they couldn't just allow the Republic to crumble to a war created by a rebellious, sectionist group of people. Kenobi, though he understood, took this opportunity to respectfully inform the Council that he was leaving the Order. He could not stand by while the Jedi became soldiers, and he refused to be a part of a war as one of these generals. The next day, Obi-Wan would pack up the very, very few belongings that he truly owned. He commissioned a shuttle to Mandalore, ready to leave the Jedi and the Republic behind him. After hours of travel, Obi-Wan would arrive on Mandalore. Immediately, he rushed to the palace, wanting to find Satine. He hadn't told her he was coming, and he hoped to surprise her. As the sun broke into the morning sky, Obi-Wan would find his way to the room of Satine Kryze. She would wake up to see the man she once loved sitting at the foot of her bed. Thinking she was dreaming, she rubbed her eyes again and asked if it was really him who was there. Obi-Wan smiled and leaned in, kissing Satine. He was so happy to see her, and he had missed her so much. The two pulled apart as Obi-Wan told her everything that had happened: the Battle of Geonosis, the deaths of the Jedi, and the militarization pushed onto the Order by the Republic and the Council. He told her that she was right, and that the Jedi were not the organization they once were. While it pained Satine to see Obi-Wan leave the Order, she was so happy to see him, and that was really all that mattered at this point. She would jump out of bed and drag him out of the room, giving a tour of her palace and showing him the beauty that Mandalore had become in the now peaceful time. They could finally live together in peace, at least for now. As the Clone Wars began, the Jedi were given command of different legions and battalions of the clones. Quinlan and Anakin, though, were not given such duties. Their role was instead to be assigned different undercover, covert missions to help the war effort, whether it be to obtain information, track down separatist leadership, or anything else that may be of use to the Republic. However, as the galaxy went from peace to a war-torn strew in the mere days, the first mission of the two would be to Geonosis. Here, separatist forces led by General Loathsome were occupying the planet, using it for strategic resourcing and as a location to strategically place themselves. While the Jedi were, along with their clone battalions, were making significant progress in retaking the world, they were in desperate need of reinforcements. Since the Jedi Council were unable to get through reinforcements to Geonosis, they sent young Ahsoka Tano to relay the information to order Anakin and Quinlan to return to Coruscant. They had an urgent undercover mission to attend. Quinlan, however, was not fond of leaving a battle unfinished. He told the young Togruta that he would stay and fight, finishing the mission at hand. Anakin asked her how she got to the planet, and she told him that their carrier dropped her off. Vos told Anakin to get to the carrier ship and reach out to the Republic. They needed more help. As Anakin and Ahsoka used the small ship to sneak through the Separatist blockade of the planet, she informed him that Yoda had assigned her as his new Padawan. Anakin was very taken aback. He hadn't requested a Padawan. He had just become a knight, and he wasn't sure that he wasn't even ready to teach somebody. However, he knew that just as Quinlan had helped Ayla with Finn, his former master would help him teach Ahsoka at the same time. He smiled at the young girl, recalling his time as a young Padawan. On the carrier, Anakin would contact the Jedi Council about reinforcements, and he was ensured that they were en route. The two would quickly leave, departing back to the base on Geonosis. Upon arrival, they were met with the sight of a growing energy shield, one that would be growing towards enveloping their forces in big cannons. Anakin would be lost, unsure of what to do, and unknowing of where Quinlan was. Ahsoka, though, offered a plan for them to sneak behind enemy lines, through the shield, and destroy the shield generator from the inside out. Anakin liked this girl. She was daring and she had guts. The only issue is how to get into the shield. Ahsoka suggested flanking them, or maybe running through the droid forces themselves. Anakin thought for a brief moment, and then he grabbed his new Padawan by the hand. He had an idea. The two would hide under a crate on the path of the droids that they were walking on, waiting for the shield and the droids to pass by them. When they were able to do that, they would sneak back to the shield generator and disable it, opening up the droid army to the full might of the clone forces. Quinlan, trying to buy time for a plan he only hoped Anakin might have, decided it best to fake surrender himself to General Loathsome. The two would meet and discuss in the terms of surrender, but it would already be too late. The shields had been destroyed by Anakin and Ahsoka, and Vos would then take the general into custody. The battle was won, all thanks to the new Padawan of Anakin Skywalker. As the months of the war turned into years, Anakin would train Ahsoka in the same way that Quinlan had trained him. Ahsoka would learn Form 4, as well as learn the ins and outs of the Coruscant underworld, wherever the two were not deployed. This master and apprentice also delved undercover and infiltrated the ranks of different separatist branches and inner circles. Sometimes they would be joined by Quinlan, but often it was just the two of them. Ahsoka and Anakin worked really well together. At one point, Anakin would even pull the level 5 stunt that Quinlan had pulled with him, calling in a favor from Cad Bane to do so. In the second year of the war, Quinlan had deep undercover in the Techno-Union, working to find locations of secret droid factories across the Outer Rim. Anakin and Ahsoka, though, were much less busy, often deployed with Ayla, Finn, and other Jedi generals, particularly difficult war fronts. During one mission, the two being deployed in the Battle of Felucia, Anakin would get a transmission for him and Ahsoka to return to Coruscant. They were being reassigned. They were also told to contact Quinlan. Anakin always had a way to reach his former master. Vos's skills and retrocognition were essential for this mission, and Anakin understood that. Anakin would contact his old master and explain the situation. While Vos did not want to blow his cover, he knew he had to do something, and something had to be done. Plus, knowing that the Jedi could not do something without him, just fed his ego just a little bit. He would find a way out of the Techno-Union by, like he usually did, breaking his left arm, and he would use the excuse to go home for medical treatment, departing and returning to Coruscant. The three Jedi would find themselves in front of the Jedi Council. Here they would be informed of a hostage situation that took place inside the Senate building, during which Cad Bane freed Zero the Hutt from prison. Quinlan was told of his former master's death. Thulm had died just after the Battle of Geonosis, but Vos had been undercover since then and had not been able to ever contact with the Order. Vos would be a bit distraught, but he understood the mission at hand. The three would depart for Nal Hutta to inquire with the Hutt Council on the matter. Upon arrival, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Quinlan would find themselves in front of the Hutt Council, who would tell the three that they had no idea where Zero could possibly be. Quinlan, feeling that this was a lie, noticed a cup on the floor. He knew that this was a moment for the action. He would walk over, just pick it up, and the vision going white. He then saw Zero the Hutt, here, in this room. Vos smiled and thanked the Hutts, leading Anakin and Ahsoka out of the palace. Little to the knowledge of the Hutts, Zero had escaped with his former lover, Snooty. The two would find their way to Mama the Hutt, Zero's mother, where they would obtain a ship. With this, Snooty and Zero would take off, departing for Teth, to find the secret grave of Zero's father. He had been keeping a diary here that contained all the atrocities of the Hutts. If leaked to the Republic, the Hutts would no longer be allies of the newly militarized powerhouse of the galaxy. On Teth, Snooty would reveal her true intentions, killing Zero and stealing the diary, taking it back to the Hutt Council for a hefty reward. Cad Bane, as well as the three Jedi, would also find themselves on Teth, following leads given to them by Mama the Hutt. At the sight of Zero's corpse, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Quinlan would encounter Bane, as he said,
"Well, looks as if we both were robbed of this one. Wouldn't you say?"
Looks that way, Bane. You really caused a mess back there on Coruscant. You plan on cleaning any of that up?
You know me better than that, Vos. I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
As the three, without Zero, and without the diary, would return to Coruscant, Quinlan would return to his mission within the Techno-Union, and Anakin and Ahsoka would continue to train and fight on the warfront, and take some not-so-high-key undercover missions. The important and especially dangerous ones were saved for Quinlan. As another year would come and go, Quinlan would return to Coruscant with the locations of the secret droid foundries in hand. He would be immediately reassigned undercover to the space station at Ultor Hub under the name Master Tal. Here, he was here to find and intercept Shev Valad, a black market merchant who was shadily obtaining the goods of dead individuals, usually those he set up to be murdered, then selling the objects for a massive profit. His mission was cut very short though, as a Jedi Knight, Akar Deshu, came to relieve Vos from his post. They would make a quick work of Sheb, but without finding information they wished for. They then returned to Coruscant, Quinlan receiving furthermore orders. Quinlan was told he was to infiltrate the inner circle of Count Dooku, feigning the fall to the dark side, all in an assassination attempt on the Separatist leader. Vos, though questioning the motives of the Council, took this mission with pleasure. Vos would search out Ventress, eventually finding her in level 1313 of Coruscant's underworld. He would tell her of his plan to kill her former master, who had betrayed her not too long ago, and she agreed. She would bring him to the homeworld of Dathomir, where she trained in the ways of the dark side, and show him what Grievous and the Separatists did to her people. The two, after extensive training, traveled to Anaxis, where Quinlan would begin his infiltration of the Separatist ranks. Over the coming months, Dooku would find Quinlan more and more interesting, allowing him to grow within the ranks of the Separatist forces. Quinlan would also release different Republic secrets, strategies, and plans, helping to establish his allegiance to the Separatists. Eventually, Dooku would want this so-thought former Jedi to be his new apprentice. During this time, Vos and Ventress would find themselves working closely together, and the two would begin to have feelings for one another. They would fall in love, and this love would be what kept Quinlan from truly turning to the dark side as Dooku's apprentice. For a while. While Quinlan was off infiltrating Dooku's inner circle, Anakin was becoming increasingly frustrated with the Chancellor of the Republic. For over 2 years, the Chancellor had been pulling Anakin out of the front lines, and from undercover to lecture him on seemingly meaningless topics. Palpatine would use these times to talk to Anakin about his relationship with his former master, with his Padawan, and with the Order. He prodded Anakin about how he felt about the Jedi, and had the Jedi betrayed Qui-Gon, and having Quinlan replace Obi-Wan as his teacher, and even told the young Jedi Knight that Obi-Wan had left the Order because of this betrayal. Anakin, mostly due to the teachings of Quinlan, never fell for these deceptions. He felt that Quinlan was the right master for him, and the Council made the right choice in his training. He also knew Kenobi very, very well, and he very much so understood that Kenobi left the Order because of politicization, not because of this so-called betrayal of Qui-Gon. While this was suspicious to Anakin, The way the Chancellor would try and make him question the Order, he often boiled it down to the simple game of politics. He thought that Palpatine just wanted someone in the Order to act as his pawn, and help lobby for him within the Order. However, Anakin began noticing that things would go wrong as Palpatine pulled him away from the war. He would leave the war front and his troops would suddenly be killed in surprise attacks or counterattacks. His cover would be blown at the worst possible moment, and other sort of things. This caused suspicion within Anakin, and within Ahsoka, who was always accompanying her master back to Coruscant. While they wanted to dismiss Palpatine being a politician, not a war strategist, and therefore simply making incompetent decisions. On the other side of the galaxy, Vos was becoming closer and closer to Dooku. While his love for Ventress kept him sane and helped him not fall to the dark side, Dooku could sense the conflict and imbalance within the Kevlar Jedi. Vos had a difficult past. He had connections to his family before being brought to Coruscant. He watched his mom be brutally murdered, and he had been through hell and back in the underworld. He had to do things that made even Dooku sick to his stomach, and Dooku had committed a mass genocide in his own life. Dooku preyed on these weak points in Vos's mind, and was able to bring him closer and closer to the dark side, and towards becoming his true Padawan. Vos knew that his sole mission was to kill Dooku, and he could have done that on several occasions, but he knew that there was more. He often heard Dooku talk about his own master, one Darth Sidious, and that the war was created by and being orchestrated by him. The identity of this Dark Master was only known to a few, and Quinlan thought that, if he were able to become the apprentice of Dooku, he may find out who the mastermind of the Sith truly was. Another few months, Vos would establish himself as Agent Enigma, and he would lead Separatist forces to several victories. However, Dooku, knowing Vos still had some light within him, pulled him off the front after a few battles. The Separatist leader would only bring Quinlan home to Sereno, where he would then torture Vos both physically and mentally. Vos would hold out for a while, using his love for Ventress and his connection to his former Padawans to give him hope. Unfortunately, he let it all slip, that he'd been working with Ventress, and the Count was able to sense that Quinlan loved the last Night Sister in existence. Dooku would tell Vos that it was Ventress who killed his former master, Master Thulm. He wouldn't believe this, denying that Ventress would ever do such a thing. That is until Dooku handed him the lightsaber of Thulm. When Quinlan touched it, he had a vision, and it all went white. He then saw his former master being struck down by the woman he now loved. He couldn't believe it. Rage filled his being, as he screamed in agony. He felt betrayed, and for the very first time, he fell completely to the dark side. Quinlan spent the next few months leading the Separatist forces to crushing victory after crushing victory. Anytime he wasn't on the battlefield, he was training with Dooku in the dark side of the Force, learning how to use Force lightning, and perfecting Force chokes. Quinlan only became a shadow of the man he once was. This all changed, though, when the Council became concerned that Dooku was still alive, and Quinlan was unheard of in almost an entire year. Anakin was sent to Sereno to find his former master and assassinate Count Dooku once and for all. While this mission was to be classified and only known to the Council, Anakin, like usual, would not follow his orders too strictly. He enlisted the help of his friend, Finn Urte, as well as that of his Padawan on this mission. The three Jedi would make their way to Sereno, keeping a low profile and ensuring that the Separatists did not know where they were on this world. After hours of sneaking around alleys and past droid guards, they made their way into Dooku's palace on Sereno. Here they would find Dooku seated, watching Quinlan and Savage Oprez duel each other. Anakin, thinking through the scenario, told Ahsoka and Finn to stay hidden. Quinlan had trained him to always be 10 steps ahead of his target, and Anakin had come prepared, handing his apprentice a small device. He told her that this was a recorder, and that, even if he died, she needed to get the information to the Council, no matter the cost. Anakin then walked out of the shadows and approached Dooku, surprising the Count by igniting his lightsaber and holding it to his neck. The room went still as Quinlan and Savage stared at Skywalker. Anakin saw and sensed the darkness within his former master, whose eyes were a deep yellow. In an instant, both Quinlan and Savage reacted to Anakin and raced towards him, lightsabers ignited, ready to strike him down. Anakin, cocky as ever, used the Force to push Savage back, throwing him to a wall, knocking him unconscious. However, he knew he could not hurt nor kill his former master. Jedi were not supposed to be or adhere or even find themselves attached, but Quinlan was like a father to him, and he knew that he were about to fight with him. Anakin and Quinlan would duel. With Dooku watching from his throne, the Count would know that he could step in easily and defeat Skywalker, but he saw the opportunity to test for Vos. If Vos could kill his former apprentice, then Dooku would know that his allegiance was to the dark side, and it would be solidified forever. Anakin, though not being experienced or as skilled as Quinlan, used his extensive training in Form 7 to counter the rage-filled, haphazard strikes of Vos. The two continued to duel for only moments before Anakin knew what he had to do, cutting off his former master's left arm, which he knew to be Quinlan's non-dominant arm. Anakin force-pushed Vos against the wall, knocking him unconscious as well. Dooku stood up. He had no idea that the young Jedi could be so powerful. Quinlan and Qui-Gon were once good friends of his, and he knew that both had an influence on the training of Skywalker. Dooku walked in circles, pacing around Anakin, telling him of the grand scheme of the war.
Young Skywalker, so ignorant, so willing to save the Republic, and for what?
Dooku continued walking as Anakin glanced over to where Ahsoka and Finn were hiding.
Qui-Gon Jinn, I am sure you remember him. He was the one who saved you from that backwater planet of yours.
Anakin asked what of him.
He once believed as I did. He saw the corruption of the Senate, and he never approved of the Jedi playing politics.
Anakin responded that Qui-Gon would have never joined Dooku.
Well, Quinlan here did, and I have a feeling you will too. What if I told you that the Republic was under the control of the Dark Lord of the Sith?
Anakin stared at Dooku and demanded that he keep talking, prodding further.
Hundreds of senators, as well as many other corporate alliances, are under the control of one called Darth Sidious. Newt Gunray, Viceroy of the Trade Federation, was one in league with this Dark Lord, but betrayed by Sidious almost 10 years ago. That is when he came to me for help, and the Separatist Alliance was born.
Anakin thought for a moment, asking if this Darth Sidious was Dooku's master.
Perhaps.
Finally, everything clicked in Anakin's mind. This Sidious was the Chancellor, and he said it aloud, and Dooku smiled.
Ah, so Quinlan did train you well. I'm quite frankly surprised. Now, you must see why you have to join me, as your master has.
Anakin smiled, cocky, knowing that Ahsoka had all the proof she needed to get back to the Council. So, Anakin responded with a sorry count, but my answer is obviously no. Anakin ignited his blue blade as he lunged towards Dooku, swinging at him. Dooku responded by igniting his crimson blade and blocking. The two engaged in a duel, and Dooku was thoroughly impressed by Anakin's prowess with a lightsaber. Anakin's use of Form 7 along with Form 4 allowed him to be a brute force with his strikes, fueled by his emotions as well as leaps and fast-paced movements to move around the Count. Despite this, Dooku, proficient in Form 2 and able to counteract any form of lightsaber combat with it, was able to dominate Anakin in combat. His strength on the Force and experience with a lightsaber outmatched that of Anakin exceedingly. As Anakin drew closer and closer to defeat, he saw a movement in the shadows. Suddenly, a green lightsaber ignited as Finn swung at Dooku from behind. Moments later, two more lightsabers, both green as well, ignited, slashing through Dooku's robes. Though Dooku was not yet wounded, he was taken aback by the presence of two more Jedi and three more lightsabers. The three Jedi would have no mercy on him, taking him on 3 versus 1, all at once. The fight would continue, only for moments longer. Dooku unable to take on 3 of the most skilled young Jedi the Order had to offer. In a last-ditch effort to save his own life, Dooku jumped in the air, using the Force to lunge towards Ahsoka. Finn, seeing this, slashed through Dooku, cutting through his legs. The old man would fall to the floor in agony, and continue attempting to fight off the 3. Without legs, though, his mobility was useless, and Ahsoka would quickly cut off the head of the Count, ending the man's life. With the battle over, Anakin told Ahsoka to take the recording and send it to the Jedi Council immediately. He and Finn would take Savage and Quinlan into custody, dragging their still unconscious bodies to the waiting starship. Within the hour, the Council received the transmission and put together a team to take out Palpatine. With the Jedi not yet spread thin, as the Outer Rim sieges had not yet begun, the team was extensive, consisting of Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shakti, Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, Depa Billaba, Sassy Tin, and other several Jedi Knights. They would make their way to the Senate building and into the Chancellor's chambers. The Chancellor would be seated, staring out a window and sensing the coming battle, but he did not know the numbers that the Jedi would bring. As he turned to the door, Palpatine saw a dozen or so Jedi staring at him, and fear filled his body for the first time in decades. While he would draw his 2 lightsabers, attempting to fend off the Jedi, he was outnumbered and outmatched. While he could have taken in most cases of these Jedi one-to-one, this was impossible. Within seconds, Palpatine would look down to see a purple blade sticking through his chest. Moments later, a short green blade took off the head of Sidious. The Sith, for the first time in history, were no more. Over the next coming weeks, the Jedi would present the evidence sent in by Anakin to the Senate. They would all be in shock and hold an election for a new Chancellor. While many called for Bail Organa to take a seat of power, they all nominated Senator Padme Amidala to take the place instead. She would be voted in as the next Supreme Chancellor by a narrow margin. Not even days after obtaining office, Padme would contact her old friend in the Senate of the Separatists, Mina Bonteri. She would propose a ceasefire treaty, followed by peace negotiations between the two governments. With Dooku and Sidious dead, the process would be swift and easy, ending the war on all fronts and bringing peace talks together between the two governments. While the peace deal would become more time-consuming than the ceasefire, it would eventually come to fruition after several months of debate. The Confederacy of Independent Systems would act as its own government in alliance with the Republic, and it would control most of the Outer Rim, as well as a large portion of the Inner Rim. The Republic Senate was convinced by Padme and Bail, along with their allied senators, that their own government was simply not efficient enough to actively just govern the entire galaxy. The Confederacy would take the edges of the galaxy out of the Republic's concern, hopefully bringing new life and prospering to the systems out there. The two governments would declare peace and corporative independence, signing treaties that would ban slavery, institute limits on militarization, and settling other such outcomes that each side had. They would also establish the banking clans as a treasury for both governments, retaining the galactic credit as the primary currency. As the two governments would coexist in the galaxy, finding ways to be of use to each other, and being able to give more focus, rights, and aid to each system in their control, this, surpassing most, would turn into an amazing system that was best for the people of the galaxy. As for the Jedi, Quinlan would be cared for inside of the Jedi Temple for several months, eventually healing and returning to the light side, forgiving Ventress for the murder of Thome, as Quinlan had fallen to the dark side and now understood the control that the dark side had on an individual. Vos then left the Order. He and Ventress began working on the Coruscant police as detectives and as hunters, eventually getting married and having 3 children, who they raised just to be as daring and cunning. Yoda, after the Clone Wars, stepped down from the position of Grand Master, opting to train Grogu, the youngling of his own species, though in the ways of the Force. He would be replaced by Mace Windu, who would then appoint Plo Koon as Master of the Order. There, the two would, soon after, depart from the temple to find General Grievous, who was lost without Dooku. They would swiftly and easily kill the cyborg, and the lightsabers Grievous had were taken back to the temple, and would be enshrined as tributes to the Jedi who were killed during the Clone Wars. Ahsoka, for her part in taking down the Sith, and bringing about the end of the war, became one of the youngest Jedi to ever be knighted at the age of 16. She would, soon after, take on a Padawan of her own, a Wookiee by the name of Gungi. Ahsoka trained him to become a master of strength and agility, and eventually, Gungi would learn Jakai and become the first Wookiee to ever use 2 lightsabers in combat. Anakin, with his Padawan, now a knight, and having killed Dooku and saved Quinlan, was offered a seat on the High Council. He so graciously accepted it, taking the seat that Plo Koon left vacant after his promotion. Soon after, Saesee Tiin would also retire, and Finn Atray would be offered his vacant seat, which she would also accept excitedly. Anakin and Finn would continue to act as Jedi liaisons to the Coruscant police, often working with Ventress and Quinlan on missions and investigations. Anakin's former fears of no longer working with his master in this environment would never come true, but his former wishes did. Within only months of joining the Council, Anakin had been to every level on Coruscant's Undercity, except levels 1 through 4, obviously. Obi-Wan would live his life out on Mandalore for years to come, helping Satine keep peace on her world. The two would marry and have 2 children, a boy named Jin and a girl named Shmi. Maul, never found by Savage, who was imprisoned by the Republic mere days after the fall of Dooku. Maul, instead, would live the rest of his life out in madness, never enacting his revenge on Kenobi. Eventually, Satine would hand over leadership of Mandalore to a woman of another clan, Sabine Wren. Satine would entrust her to lead Mandalore in the peaceful direction it was headed in, and her and Kenobi would return to Coruscant. Here, Kenobi found a Jedi Order that had distanced itself from the politics of the galaxy. Instead, they reverted to the old ways of neutrality, peacekeeping, and giving aid to those in need. He would be welcomed back into the Order with open arms. Soon after, Jocasta Nu would retire from her position as head Jedi Archivist, giving the position to Obi-Wan. knowing that he understood the archives in the ways that even she didn't. As more years passed, the Jedi Council would continue to distance the Order from the Senate. Mace would also retire, with Plo filling his role, and Anakin being granted the rank of Master of the Order. Soon after, Gungi passed the Jedi Knight trials with Ahsoka, being offered the position on the Council, left vacant by Anakin's promotion. Two governments, Republic and Confederacy, would work together in harmony, and the alliance for hundreds of years, finding success in their cooperation. The Jedi would become even more distant from galactic politics, and they would keep peace and help on all in need, neither being loyal to the Republic or the Confederacy. 200 years after the Clone Wars, and the Jedi Order was unrecognizable from its former self, relocating their base of operations to Ahch-To, the ancient homeworld of the Jedi. They would be the peacekeepers of all things in the galaxy. While Ahsoka and Finn had only died around 50 years prior of natural deaths, two Jedi still remained from this era long gone. Grogu, now fully matured and extremely skilled as a Jedi, served as the Jedi Order Grand Master, living out Yoda's legacy as a master within the Force itself. At his right hand sat Gungi, who had become one of the most proficient duelists the Order had ever seen. He was now old, but he was agile and strong as ever. The two would continue to lead the Order towards peace and balance for centuries to come. And that, everybody, is our story today. Special thanks to George Story, Benjamin Wells, Jay Hoffman, Warping the 308, Icy Raptor, Gorton, Chancellor Yolanda Standards for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes on this so we can see what if Obi-Wan killed Vader in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. This is a video you definitely don't want to miss. Also, if you want to see a what if, let me down below. I do want to comments, but I don't do crossovers. And one last thing, if you want to support the community, check out the Patreon, Twitch, and community Discord. And miss out you win the giveaway, go down below this pinned comment. The pinned comment is how you get into the giveaway. You just go down below, you click on the link, and you join it. And you just type your name in there, and I will accept the names. Giveaway is 35,000 subscribers by July 31st. I think we can still do it. If not, I'll be announcing the next giveaway for 50,000 subscribers in the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that if we do not hit 35k by the 31st. We hit 30k, and I think that's a huge achievement. So thank you all for that so much. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Anyways, let's talk about our story here, ladies and gentlemen. This is incredible. Honestly, Cam, you did a great job. So special thanks to Cameron Hall for doing this. Yeah, they absolutely killed this. This is a fantastic story. So I'll be completely honest. I don't read these stories until I don't fully read them until I read the script. So I'm reading this with you guys for the first time. And it's really like reading the entire consensus, essentially, of what's going on. And it's always such a nice surprise seeing the direction he goes. And I think this story is really special. I think this is great because Cameron takes on a whole new perspective of a series that I've been doing on my channel since the second upload, essentially. You know, we've been doing the Train series for forever, training Anakin. And I think Cameron finds a way to bring a new perception, a new identity to the Train series. And I really like this story because it's special and it's unique in its own way. You know, Quinlan is such a unique Jedi. He's just incredible. He's not a normal Jedi. He's just this guy that just doesn't follow the code, right? And the first time we meet him, he's like a maniac, right? And I thought that Cameron would do a fantastic job with the story. He blew it out of the park. Honestly, it's a fantastic story. It's probably one of my favorite stories on the channel. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I love the story, and it's so humbling to have to be able to say that this is one of my favorite stories on my own channel. Like, this is awesome. Quinlan as a teacher is really unique, and kind of following along the trajectory of canon while also adding new elements of it into the story is really cool. I love, so the thumbnail I gave him was the thumbnail you guys see, which is Anakin with the tattoos. And I love that he incorporated that because that was so special, and I didn't expect that to be incorporated into the story. But those are tattoos from the 2002 Clone Wars animated show. And I thought that was really cool to incorporate into this, is that Anakin also follows through with something that we've seen in Legends. And there's a lot of both mix between Legends and canon, which I really like what Cameron does in this, is incorporates that. And I think the ending is really proficient. You see this change. You know, we get to see Obi-Wan be an archivist while having kids with, I'm sorry, I ship it so much, I love it. Satine and Obi-Wan forever and ever. I will never not ship it. It's one of my favorite things ever. And I was so happy to see that story, that romance evolve throughout the story. And when we move on from that and talk about how the Jedi change and how everything in this story is so sweet. It's just so sweet. It's enjoyable. It's very It's a very happy ending, which after yesterday's video, I think we needed. But it really brings a new representation to what we have done here with these trained videos about these characters and watching them train Anakin Skywalker and have their all different perceptions on it. And I'm telling you guys, we have a bunch of new trained videos coming out, so I'm excited to talk about them. But this was incredible. This is one of my favorite in the Train series. I mean, this was a great story. Cameron knocked it down the park. Home run, grand slam all the way, whatever you want to call it. A goal, I don't even know, a hat trick, a rim shot from this British football or whatnot. But I mean, absolutely bonkers. Amazing job here, incorporating all the different elements of Quinlan and just having so much time in the Undercity. Because we were supposed to get that, right? We were supposed to get Star Wars 1313. I don't want to speculate or talk about that, but we were supposed to get this Undercity world that was open world and experience that for the first time. And it was really nice to go into the story and go through that really in-depth story of just seeing the Star Wars underworld, the underworld of Coruscant, so well. And I think he had captured that feeling, that nitty-gritty feeling of that, and having him interact with Cad Bane and a lot of stuff. I think terrific story overall. I think he absolutely knocked it out of the park. Terrific job, Cameron. Thank you for being a part of my team. Again, special thanks to the PPT. You guys are incredible. You guys help me out so much. I really do appreciate it. As for everyone else, I hope you all enjoyed this. This was an incredible story, so yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Anyways, I love you all, my friends. Subscribe. We're going to hit 50,000 soon, and let's keep going from there. You guys got awesome projects and awesome videos coming out in the next month. August is going to be huge, and I want you guys to be excited for it. Regardless all, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.